The opulent living room of Gregory Harrow's penthouse glimmered with signs of affluence. Crystal chandeliers threw their light across marbled floors, and walls adorned with priceless art whispered tales of his immense wealth. Harrow, a real estate magnate with a reputation for charm and ruthlessness, had long basked in the envy of the social elite. Yet, behind his polished exterior lurked secrets that could shatter the carefully curated facade. Marianne Buckley was far removed from Harrow's glittering world. She was a librarian whose figure, ample and unapologetic, often invited ridicule in a society obsessed with appearances. But Harrow saw in her something the world overlooked: wit, compassion, and a fierce intellect. Their affair began as a series of clandestine encounters, stolen evenings in remote countryside inns, long conversations behind closed doors. For Marianne, it was a whirlwind of love she never anticipated. For Harrow, it was an intoxicating escape from the suffocating expectations of his social circle. Over time, the affair deepened. Marianne, though wary, allowed herself to dream. Harrow promised her a future, a life together. Once he untangled himself from his cold and calculating wife, Evelyn. What Marianne didn't know was that Evelyn Harrow was not a woman to be discarded lightly. A former attorney, she had built her fortune alongside Gregory and knew every corner of his empire. Their marriage was less about love and more about survival in a world that respected power. When whispers of her husband's indiscretions reached her ears, she acted with precision. On a brisk autumn night, Harrow invited Marianne to his penthouse. There, he confessed his growing fear. Evelyn had discovered their relationship and threatened to destroy him. Financially, socially, even physically. Marianne, though shaken, insisted that they confront Evelyn together. Harrow's eyes darted to the corner of the room, where a small mahogany bar cart housed an ornate decanter of brandy. He poured them both a glass, his hands trembling as he handed her one. An hour later, Marianne collapsed to the floor, clutching her throat, gasping for breath. Harrow, with tears streaming down his face, knelt beside her. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the weight of his guilt almost unbearable. "She made me do it." The poison in the brandy worked swiftly. Within minutes, Marianne lay lifeless, her vibrant spirit extinguished. Gregory Harrow didn't realize Evelyn was watching. From the shadows of the adjoining study, she emerged, a cruel smile tugging at her lips. "You're pathetic," she spat. "She was never going to fit into our world. Consider this a lesson in loyalty." Evelyn snapped a photo of the scene, Harrow cradling Marianne's body, before dialing the police. "There's been a murder," she said calmly. When the authorities arrived, Evelyn's narrative was as polished as her courtroom days. Gregory had grown erratic, she claimed, driven by paranoia and jealousy. His affair with Marianne had spiraled out of control, culminating in her tragic poisoning. Harrow, dazed and broken, couldn't muster a coherent defense. The evidence, a damning cocktail of fingerprints on the glass, text messages professing love, and Evelyn's staged photo, sealed his fate. Marianne's death became fodder for tabloids, her name reduced to scandalous headlines. Gregory Harrow was sentenced to life, his empire dismantled, his reputation obliterated. Evelyn, meanwhile, emerged unscathed, reclaiming her role as a grieving but resilient widow. In the quiet confines of her home, she sipped from the same crystal decanter, her lips curling into a satisfied grin. Secrets, she mused, were the currency of the powerful, and she had mastered the art of spending them wisely. Years passed, but the tragedy lingered in whispers throughout the social elite. Evelyn Harrow, now remarried to a venture capitalist, continued to thrive. She had transformed her late husband's crumbled empire into her own, her new image as a resilient businesswoman solidifying her place among the wealthy and influential. Yet, beneath the polished exterior, a storm brewed. Detective Eleanor Grant, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for tenacity, had never been satisfied with the conclusion of the Harrow case. The details of Marianne Buckley's death and Gregory's downfall seemed too convenient, too perfect. Something about Evelyn Harrow's calm demeanor in the courtroom nagged at her, a predator's stillness, not a victim's grief. Grant had spent years quietly collecting evidence, careful not to draw Evelyn's attention. A chance breakthrough arrived in the form of a retired maid who had worked in the Harrow household. The woman, nearing the end of her life, sought absolution. She recounted overhearing arguments between Gregory and Evelyn, with Evelyn threatening to frame him for his affair if he didn't comply with her demands. The maid's testimony alone wasn't enough, but it pointed Grant in a new direction. Digging deeper, she unearthed phone records showing Evelyn's private calls to a notorious chemist with connections to illicit substances. It seemed the poison that killed Marianne wasn't as random as the prosecution had claimed. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source: Gregory Harrow himself. In prison, he had grown bitter and disillusioned, but a visit from Grant stirred something in him. She laid out the evidence she'd uncovered, and for the first time in years, Harrow saw a glimmer of hope. She orchestrated everything, he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. I didn't want Marianne dead. I was weak and Evelyn knew it. She played me like a pawn. Armed with new evidence, Grant secured a warrant to search Evelyn's home. Hidden in a safe behind a false panel in her study was a journal, meticulously detailing her manipulations. Evelyn had documented everything: the affair, her plans to poison Marianne, and the staged photo to frame Gregory. Each page dripped with malice, a confession disguised as a victory lap. When Evelyn was arrested, her mask of composure cracked. For the first time, the public saw the ruthless mastermind behind the grieving widow. Her trial was a media circus, the scandal reigniting the public's fascination with the Harrow tragedy. This time, the evidence was undeniable. Evelyn's own words sealed her fate, and she was sentenced to life in prison. Gregory Harrow was exonerated, though he left prison a shadow of the man he once was. He disappeared from the public eye, retreating to a quiet life in the countryside, haunted by the choices that had cost Marianne her life. Detective Grant, though hailed as a hero, found little satisfaction in the resolution. Justice had been served, but it couldn't bring back Marianne or undo the damage caused by Evelyn's cunning. In the end, the Harrow affair became a cautionary tale of wealth, power, and the deadly games played in their pursuit. Years later, the Harrow affair was etched into the annals of criminal history, a case studied by law students and criminal psychologists alike. Evelyn Harrow, now confined to a maximum security prison, became a symbol of calculated evil. Though she maintained her stoic demeanor within the prison walls, whispers circulated about her unyielding control over her environment. Rumors suggested that even behind bars, Evelyn pulled strings, bending others to her will. Detective Eleanor Grant, now retired, remained haunted by the case. The weight of uncovering such darkness had left its mark on her. She had written a book about her career, dedicating a significant portion to the Harrow affair. The book was a bestseller, but for Grant, it was a way to exorcise demons rather than achieve fame. On a cold winter morning, Grant received an unexpected letter. The envelope was plain, the handwriting meticulous. Inside was a single sheet of paper bearing the words, *, we all play the roles we're given, detective. Don't think the game is over. *, there was no signature, but Grant recognized the writing immediately. It was Evelyn's. Evelyn's cryptic message unnerved Grant. Though the letter wasn't overtly threatening, it hinted at something deeper, something unresolved. Grant couldn't shake the feeling that Evelyn still had a final move planned. Meanwhile, in the countryside, Gregory Harrow had rebuilt a modest life. He spent his days tending a small vineyard, far from the chaos of his former world. But his peace was shattered when a stranger arrived at his door, a journalist named Rachel Vance. Young and ambitious, Rachel claimed to be working on an investigative piece about the case. She pressed Gregory for an interview, her questions piercing and precise. "Why now?" Gregory asked, suspicious of her motives. Rachel hesitated before answering. "Because Evelyn Harrow doesn't lose. If she sent that letter to Detective Grant, it means she's not done with either of you." The revelation unsettled Gregory. Rachel showed him a list of names, people connected to the original case. A former maid had gone missing. A chemist who provided Evelyn with the poison had died in an apparent accident. "She's tying up loose ends," Rachel said. "And you're next." Gregory, gripped by fear and anger, reluctantly agreed to help Rachel. Together, they revisited the events of the past, uncovering details that had gone unnoticed. They discovered Evelyn's vast network of allies, people in high places who owed her favors or feared her wrath. It became clear that Evelyn had orchestrated far more than anyone had realized. In her prison cell, Evelyn received word of Gregory's collaboration with Rachel. She smiled, her mind already plotting her next move. She had always been 2 steps ahead, and this time was no different. But Evelyn underestimated one thing: Rachel's relentless determination. While Gregory offered insights into Evelyn's psyche, Rachel unearthed documents linking Evelyn to an offshore account funneling bribes to prison staff. Evelyn's reach, it seemed, extended even beyond the prison walls. The final confrontation came when Rachel confronted Evelyn in prison, armed with evidence that could dismantle her empire once and for all. Evelyn, unbothered, leaned back in her chair, her gaze icy and unflinching. "Do you really think this ends with me?" Evelyn asked, her voice calm but laced with menace. "You may cut off the head, but the body keeps moving." Rachel left the prison that day shaken but resolute. She published her exposé, unraveling the intricate web of Evelyn's manipulations. Public outrage surged, forcing authorities to tighten control over Evelyn's network and strip her of her influence. But as Evelyn sat alone in her cell, her lips curled into a familiar smile. To her, the game was never truly over, it merely changed players. Months passed since Rachel Vance's explosive exposé, and the world seemed to move on from the Harrow affair, convinced that Evelyn Harrow's reign of manipulation had finally come to an end. Yet, Rachel couldn't shake the unease that lingered in her mind. Evelyn's cryptic warning, asterisk, "You may cut off the head, but the body keeps moving, asterisk," haunted her, especially as whispers of unexplained events continued to surface. Gregory Harrow, too, had retreated back into isolation. The media frenzy around Rachel's revelations had dredged up painful memories, and despite his innocence being fully established, Gregory remained the shadow of a broken man. His once vivid vineyard now lay untended, its vines growing wild. He rarely ventured into town, his fear of being targeted by Evelyn's unknown allies keeping him locked away. One evening, as a storm rolled over the countryside, Gregory's isolation was interrupted by the sound of tires crunching on gravel. He peered through his window and saw a black sedan parked at the edge of his property. A figure stepped out, tall, clad in a dark coat, and carrying an ominous air. Moments later, a knock echoed through his home. Gregory hesitated before opening the door, a hunting rifle in his hand. The stranger, a man with sharp, calculating eyes, smiled coldly. "Mr. Harrow?" the man began, his voice smooth and disarming. "My name is Marcus Kane. I represent interests that Evelyn Harrow once served. I believe you have something we need." Gregory's grip on the rifle tightened. "I have nothing to do with Evelyn anymore," he growled. Kane chuckled softly. "Oh, but you do. You see, Evelyn may be behind bars, but her work lives on. You were once part of her plans, whether you like it or not. And now you're part of ours." Before Gregory could respond, Kane handed him a sealed envelope. "Inside, you'll find instructions. You'd be wise to follow them, for your own safety." As quickly as he arrived, Kane vanished into the storm, leaving Gregory trembling in the doorway. Inside the envelope was a photograph, a candid shot of Rachel Vance walking down a city street, unaware of the camera trained on her. Alongside it was a note, asterisk, "Silence her." Asterisk. Rachel's life, meanwhile, had grown increasingly chaotic. Though her exposé had made her a rising star in investigative journalism, it had also drawn the attention of dangerous individuals. Anonymous threats arrived in her inbox almost daily, and she began noticing unfamiliar faces lingering near her apartment. Her paranoia heightened when she received an unsigned letter in the mail containing only 3 words. Asterisk, "Stay out. Stop." Asterisk. It was clear Evelyn's allies were regrouping, and they saw Rachel as a threat. Determined not to be intimidated, Rachel doubled down on her research. She uncovered connections between Evelyn's offshore accounts and a shadowy organization with ties to global corruption. An organization Evelyn had once been deeply enmeshed in. What she didn't realize was how far they were willing to go to protect their secrets. One night, while returning home, Rachel noticed a figure lurking near her car. She turned, heart racing, only to find Gregory Harrow standing in the shadows. "You need to leave this alone," Gregory warned, his voice low and desperate. Rachel's eyes narrowed. "You're working with them, aren't you?" "No," Gregory snapped. "But they've made it clear, if I don't stop you, they'll come for me. And they won't stop there." Rachel stepped closer, her gaze unyielding. "Then help me expose them. Evelyn isn't the end of this. She's just the beginning. We can take them down together." Gregory hesitated, the weight of his fear and guilt battling against a spark of courage. Finally, he nodded. What followed was a perilous alliance between Gregory and Rachel. As they delved into the depths of Evelyn's network, they discovered that her imprisonment had merely been a calculated sacrifice to distract from the larger machinations of the organization she served. Evelyn, even from her cell, remained a willing player, feeding information to her allies and directing their operations through coded messages smuggled out by corrupt prison staff. Their investigation culminated in the discovery of a hidden server farm in an abandoned warehouse, a digital archive of Evelyn's dealings, her blackmail targets, and the organization's far-reaching plans. But as Gregory and Rachel approached the site, they were ambushed by armed men. Pinned down and outnumbered, Gregory made a fateful decision. "Get to the server," he shouted to Rachel, shoving her toward the building. "I'll hold them off." Rachel hesitated, but Gregory's resolute expression left no room for argument. She sprinted inside, her heart pounding, as Gregory fired his rifle, drawing the attacker's attention. Inside the warehouse, Rachel found the servers and began downloading the data onto a portable drive. As the files transferred, she heard the sounds of gunfire and shouts growing fainter. By the time she emerged, clutching the drive, the attackers were gone, and so was Gregory. The exposé that followed sent shockwaves across the globe. Rachel published the contents of the server, implicating powerful figures in a sprawling web of corruption and crime. The fallout was immense, resulting in arrests, resignations, and the dismantling of Evelyn's shadowy organization. In prison, Evelyn watched the news with a bitter smile. Her plans had been undone, but she remained unbroken. To her, survival was victory enough. Rachel, now hailed as a hero, carried the weight of her journey. Gregory Harrow's sacrifice haunted her, but his courage inspired her to keep fighting for justice. Somewhere, in the quiet countryside, rumors surfaced of a man matching Gregory's description tending a small vineyard once more. Whether he had truly survived or it was simply wishful thinking, Rachel chose to believe he had found peace. The Harrow affair had finally come to an end, but its lessons echoed in every shadowed corner where power and greed conspired to control the world. Months passed since Rachel Vance's exposé unraveled Evelyn Harrow's shadowy network, but the aftermath of the revelations left loose threads. Though many powerful figures had been toppled, Rachel knew the organization's roots ran deeper than the public suspected. Evelyn, still securely behind bars, became an enigmatic symbol of a war not yet won. Rachel had grown cautious. The price of her success was a life under constant surveillance, where every stranger might be a threat, and every darkened alley held potential danger. Yet she pressed on, sifting through the remnants of Evelyn's empire in search of any remaining danger. What Rachel didn't expect was the twist that would make the story personal. One evening, a knock on Rachel's apartment door jolted her from her thoughts. She peered through the peephole and froze. Standing there was Marcus Kane, the man who had threatened Gregory Harrow months earlier. This time he was unarmed, his hands raised in surrender. "I need your help," he said, his voice calm but strained. Against her better judgment, Rachel let him in, her hand hovering near the phone. Kane, a figure of polished menace, now looked disheveled, his confidence replaced by desperation. "I've been marked for elimination," he confessed. Evelyn's people are cleaning house and I'm next. But I know things that could finish what you started. Rachel narrowed her eyes, skeptical. And why should I trust you? Because I know where the last piece of the puzzle is, he replied. And I know Evelyn's final plan. Kane's information led Rachel to an abandoned property in the outskirts of the city. The derelict mansion, surrounded by overgrown trees and rusting gates, had once been a luxurious estate belonging to one of Evelyn's co-conspirators. Inside, they found remnants of old operations, financial ledgers, surveillance equipment, and encrypted drives. But what caught Rachel's attention was a locked metal box marked with Evelyn's initials. Inside the box was a series of handwritten letters. They were addressed to key members of Evelyn's network, each one detailing instructions for their roles in a plan codenamed Asterisk, Reclamation. Asterisk at first, Rachel couldn't decipher their meaning, but with Kane's help, the picture became clearer. Evelyn, despite her imprisonment, had engineered a plan to dismantle the justice system that had convicted her, ensuring the survival of her organization through new faces and untouchable figureheads. As Rachel and Kane pored over the documents, they realized the final phase of reclamation was imminent. Evelyn's allies were planning a coordinated attack to cripple public trust in the media, judiciary, and law enforcement. If successful, it would bury the truth of Evelyn's crimes under a wave of disinformation and chaos. But Evelyn hadn't anticipated one thing: Kane's betrayal. With his insider knowledge and Rachel's relentless determination, they began leaking critical elements of reclamation to trusted journalists and government watchdogs. Each revelation weakened Evelyn's allies, forcing them into the light where they could no longer operate in secrecy. The revelations ignited a firestorm. Evelyn, still smug in her cell, was blindsided when her closest confidants turned on her, cutting deals to save themselves. The organization's reach began to crumble, its remaining operatives scrambling for cover. Rachel and Kane, though victorious in exposing the final layers of the conspiracy, paid a steep price. Kane disappeared soon after the last leak, his fate unknown. Rachel, now a household name, was forced to live under constant security, her life forever tied to the Harrow affair. In her prison cell, Evelyn finally broke her silence, granting a single interview. When asked about the downfall of her empire, she leaned forward, her eyes glinting with the same cold intelligence that had once made her untouchable. "Empires fall," she said softly, "but the architects always remain." Her cryptic words hung in the air, leaving the world to wonder whether Evelyn Harrow still had one final card to play, or if her empire, now shattered, was merely the beginning of something darker. And somewhere, in the quiet of his vineyard, Gregory Harrow watched the world move on, knowing that even in victory, some battles never truly end. Years after the fall of Evelyn Harrow's empire, the world seemed to move on. The media frenzy faded, the Harrow affair became the subject of documentaries and true crime novels, and the names of its players, Evelyn, Gregory, Rachel, began to drift into infamy or obscurity. But for those who had lived through it, the scars remained. Rachel Vance, though celebrated as a fearless journalist, lived a life defined by isolation and vigilance. Her investigations had toppled giants, but the shadow of Evelyn's words lingered. Asterisk, the architects always remain. Asterisk. Rachel wondered if Evelyn's cryptic warning was a bluff or a prophecy. The answer came on a cold evening in February. Rachel returned to her apartment to find the door ajar. Her pulse quickened as she entered cautiously, her phone in hand, ready to call for help. The living room was untouched, but on the coffee table sat a single envelope, the wax seal bearing Evelyn's initials. Inside was a letter, written in Evelyn's sharp, deliberate hand. Asterisk, the game isn't over, my dear. You were never the target, just the pawn. Enjoy the quiet while it lasts. Asterisk. Rachel's hands shook as she read the words. There was no signature, no hint of who had delivered it. Her mind raced with questions. Was Evelyn still orchestrating her schemes from prison? Or had her lieutenants, those who survived the fallout, reassembled under new leadership? The next day, Rachel shared the letter with Detective Eleanor Grant, now fully retired but still a trusted ally. Grant's face hardened as she read it. "This isn't Evelyn's style," she said. "It's too direct." She liked to let her victims stew in uncertainty. "Then who sent it?" Rachel asked. "I don't know," Grant admitted. "But if Evelyn had an heir, someone to carry on her work, they'd be more ruthless than she ever was. The weak links are gone. What's left could be much, much worse." In the meantime, Gregory Harrow lived a life of uneasy peace in the countryside. He had cut all ties with the world that once consumed him, his vineyard now a modest but self-sustaining retreat. Yet, one morning, he found an unfamiliar package on his doorstep. Inside was a bottle of vintage wine, one he recognized as a favorite from his days with Evelyn, and a single black card engraved with the words, Asterisk, a toast to old friends. Asterisk, Gregory's blood ran cold. He smashed the bottle against the kitchen sink and burned the card in the fireplace. But the message was clear. The shadows of his past had found him. The following week, a man appeared at the edge of Gregory's property. Dressed in a tailored suit, he waited patiently, as though he knew Gregory would approach. When he finally did, rifle in hand, the man smiled. "I represent certain interests," he said, echoing Marcus Kane's long-ago introduction. "Evelyn Harrow may be gone, but her vision remains alive. And so does her knowledge. Locked away in prison, yes, but valuable nonetheless." "What do you want from me?" Gregory demanded, his voice a mix of anger and fear. "To deliver a message," the man said smoothly. "Evelyn has plans for you, Mr. Harrow, and for Rachel Vance. You've both become symbols, and symbols have power. You'll hear from us again." The man turned and walked away, leaving Gregory paralyzed with dread. Meanwhile, within the walls of her prison, Evelyn Harrow continued to play her games. Though physically confined, she thrived on the knowledge that her name still commanded fear. Through coded messages smuggled out by loyalists, she remained an unseen puppeteer, weaving threads of chaos that reached far beyond her cell. Her new protégés, younger and more ruthless, worked in her shadow. They had no allegiance to Evelyn's past. They cared only for the future she had envisioned, a world where power was currency and the vulnerable were merely collateral. One such protégé, a brilliant but untraceable hacker known only as Cypher, had taken up the mantle of Evelyn's work. Cypher's digital fingerprints began to appear in places they shouldn't: government databases, media networks, financial systems. Rachel Vance's exposé had revealed the names of Evelyn's collaborators, but Cypher was erasing those records, rewriting history to protect what remained of the organization. Rachel and Gregory soon found themselves at the center of a new storm. Anonymous threats escalated into coordinated attacks. Gregory's vineyard was set ablaze, and Rachel's car was rigged to explode, though she escaped unscathed. Both knew they were being hunted. It was Rachel who took the first step toward retaliation. She reached out to Gregory, convincing him to join forces once more. "We can't run forever," she said. "If Evelyn's still behind this, we have to cut her off at the source." Their plan was risky. Infiltrate the prison where Evelyn was held, confront her directly, and expose her remaining network. With Detective Grant's help, they secured access under the guise of an investigative documentary. When they finally faced Evelyn, the once imposing woman appeared frail but no less dangerous. She regarded them with a sly smile, her eyes flickering with amusement. "So, the pawns returned to the board," she said. "Tell me, what have you come to sacrifice this time?" Rachel stepped forward, defiant. "The only thing ending here is your legacy." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, unbothered. "You think killing me will change anything? My death would be a spark, not an extinguishment. The fire has already spread. You'll never stop what's coming." But Rachel wasn't deterred. She placed a file on the table, a dossier detailing Cypher's operations, Evelyn's remaining contacts, and a plan to dismantle her influence once and for all. For the first time, Evelyn's mask faltered. Her smirk wavered, and her eyes darkened. She realized that her protégés, in their quest for power, had grown careless. The architects might remain, but the foundation was crumbling. As Rachel and Gregory left the prison, Evelyn sat in silence, her thoughts racing. For the first time in decades, the queen of the board had lost control of her pieces. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, Evelyn Harrow wondered if it was one she couldn't win. The confrontation with Evelyn Harrow left Rachel Vance and Gregory Harrow both vindicated and unnerved. While they had managed to rattle Evelyn's foundation, her cryptic warnings about a greater threat looming in the shadows still lingered in their minds. They returned to their separate lives, but neither could truly rest, knowing the game was far from over. Rachel, ever the investigator, dove deeper into the dossier on Cypher. The mysterious hacker's activities were escalating. Entire government files had vanished overnight, corporations' financials were being rewritten, and individuals tied to Evelyn's network were resurfacing in powerful positions under new identities. Cypher wasn't merely protecting Evelyn's legacy. They were evolving it into something far more dangerous. One evening, while reviewing data she had painstakingly collected, Rachel received a livestream notification on her laptop. The screen flickered, and Cypher's symbol, a stark black chess piece, the Queen, filled the screen. A distorted voice followed. "You've come far, Ms. Vance," Cypher said, their tone a mix of mockery and respect. "But your fight is meaningless. Evelyn was a seed. The forest grows beyond your reach." Rachel's heart raced, but she refused to look away from the screen. "Then why are you so desperate to stop me?" she retorted. "If I'm insignificant, why bother with threats?" Cypher laughed, a hollow digital sound. "You misunderstand. This isn't a threat. It's an invitation. Stop chasing ghosts and join the architects of the future. You're wasted on the losing side." The screen went black, leaving Rachel stunned and furious. Cypher's taunt felt like more than an offer. It was a challenge. Meanwhile, Gregory Harrow's quiet life in the countryside was unraveling. After the arson at his vineyard, he'd taken precautions: security cameras, reinforced doors, even a trained guard dog. But nothing could protect him from the mental toll of being hunted. His sleep was plagued by nightmares of Evelyn's voice, whispering his failures, taunting him with the blood on his hands. One night, as he stared out at the darkened fields, he noticed a flicker of movement near the tree line. Grabbing his rifle, he stepped outside, the cold biting his skin. A shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, raising their hands in surrender. "Don't shoot," the person said, their voice shaky but familiar. Gregory squinted, lowering his weapon slightly. It was Marcus Kane, alive but haggard, his face bruised and his clothes torn. "They found me," Kane gasped, stumbling forward. "Cypher, Evelyn's people. They won't stop until everything's burned." Gregory brought him inside, where Kane, trembling and exhausted, revealed what he had learned. Cypher wasn't just a hacker. It was a collective, a decentralized network of operatives spread across continents. They weren't rebuilding Evelyn's empire. They were transforming it into something new. A global syndicate that operated without a single leader, without a face to target. "They've moved beyond Evelyn," Kane whispered, "but they're using her as a symbol. If you and Rachel want to stop them, you have to take her out of the equation, permanently." Gregory's blood ran cold. He had spent years avoiding further violence, but Kane's words planted a seed of dread. Was Evelyn's death the only way to stop this? Rachel and Gregory reunited days later, summoned by Detective Eleanor Grant, who had been monitoring the fallout in silence. Grant had unearthed a lead: an underground meeting of Cypher operatives scheduled in a remote European city. It was a rare opportunity to strike at the heart of the organization. "This is your chance to end it," Grant said, sliding a file across the table. "But you won't like what it takes." Inside the file was a detailed plan to infiltrate the meeting. The mission was high risk and near impossible, but the final step made Rachel's stomach turn. "Evelyn Harrow must die," Grant said bluntly. Rachel recoiled. "You can't be serious. Killing her makes us no better than them." "She's the anchor," Grant replied. "Cypher worships her. As long as she's alive, they'll never stop." Gregory, silent until now, finally spoke. "It's not just about Cypher. It's about closure. Evelyn's haunted us both long enough." The plan unfolded swiftly. Rachel, Gregory, and Kane traveled to the European city under false identities, guided by Grant's intel. The meeting was held in an opulent underground venue, filled with Cypher's key players. Evelyn, smuggled out of prison by loyalists, was set to make an appearance, a move meant to solidify her mythos among her followers. As Rachel and Gregory infiltrated the meeting, disguised among the crowd, they saw Evelyn step onto the stage. She was frail but commanding, her voice sharp as she addressed the room. "We are architects of a new order," she declared. "One that answers to no government, no law, and no morality but our own. This is our time." Gregory's hand hovered near the concealed weapon at his side, his mind racing. Rachel, standing beside him, whispered, "There has to be another way." But before they could act, the room erupted into chaos. A rival faction of Cypher, seeking to overthrow Evelyn's influence, launched an attack. Gunfire erupted, shattering the tense atmosphere. In the mayhem, Gregory and Rachel fought their way toward Evelyn, determined to confront her one last time. They found her in a side corridor, flanked by 2 bodyguards. "It always comes back to you too," Evelyn said, smiling faintly. "I should have ended this long ago." Gregory raised his weapon, but Rachel stopped him. "No," she said firmly. "She doesn't get to win like this." Instead, they recorded Evelyn's final confession on a hidden device, exposing her direct role in Cypher's atrocities. As the battle raged around them, Rachel and Gregory escaped with the recording, leaving Evelyn behind to face the wrath of her own fractured network. The confession, once leaked, dealt a devastating blow to Cypher. Evelyn's words, once a rallying cry, became her downfall. The global syndicate splintered under the weight of public scrutiny and internal betrayal. Rachel and Gregory, though scarred by their journey, finally found some semblance of peace. Evelyn Harrow's shadow, vast and all-encompassing, had finally begun to fade. But as Rachel watched the news of Cypher's collapse, she couldn't shake the feeling that the architects of chaos always found a way to rebuild. For now, however, the game was over, and she was ready to leave the board. Years had passed since Evelyn Harrow's empire crumbled for the final time. The confession Rachel Vance and Gregory Harrow had risked their lives to expose became a cornerstone of global justice reform, triggering the dismantling of Cypher's network. Evelyn's name, once synonymous with power and control, was now a ghostly reminder of the destruction wrought by unchecked ambition. Rachel, no longer the fearless journalist who had brought down a queen, had stepped away from the spotlight. She moved to a small coastal town, seeking anonymity in the ebb and flow of the ocean. Her days were quiet, spent teaching young writers and mentoring aspiring journalists. She had done what she set out to do but carried the scars of every threat, betrayal, and sacrifice along the way. Gregory Harrow also disappeared into the quiet corners of the world, returning to his vineyard to rebuild the life he had once lost. Though he had been exonerated, he lived with the guilt of Marianne's death and the role he had played in Evelyn's rise. The vineyard became his sanctuary, each growing vine a testament to his attempt at redemption. Evelyn Harrow's death made headlines years after her network fell apart. She had been found lifeless in her prison cell, the cause of death officially ruled as natural. Many believed it to be poetic justice. Others suspected one of Cypher's surviving splinters had silenced her to protect lingering secrets. Whatever the truth, Evelyn's name was relegated to history books and cautionary tales. But Evelyn's legacy didn't haunt Rachel or Gregory anymore. It haunted the world she had left behind. Despite Cypher's collapse, whispers of shadowy organizations continued to surface. They were smaller, subtler, but they bore the same hallmarks of Evelyn's playbook: manipulation, power consolidation, and the exploitation of fear. One evening, Rachel received an unmarked envelope in her mailbox. Inside was a single chess piece, a queen, black as midnight, with an inscription on the base. It read, "Asterisk, the board resets, but the game never ends." Asterisk. She stared at it for a long time, her pulse quickening. There was no return address, no explanation. She thought of Gregory, of Detective Grant, and even of Marcus Kane, whose whereabouts remained unknown. Could it be Cypher's remnants? or a new adversary rising from the ashes of the old? Rachel didn't know, and for once she didn't care. She stood on the shore, the waves licking at her feet, and tossed the chess piece into the ocean. She had fought her war, and though she bore its weight forever, she refused to let it define her. For Gregory, the arrival of the same black chess piece was met with a similar reaction. He burned it in the fire, watching the flames consume its polished surface. The world might always have its Evelyns, its ciphers, and its games, but he had chosen to step away from the board for good. The Harrow affair became a story passed down as a legend, a tale of greed, love, betrayal, and the resilience of those brave enough to fight back. But its true legacy was a question whispered in darkened rooms and corridors of power. When one empire falls, how long before another rises? The answers lay in the shadows, waiting.